tour and travel services, tour and travel sector which is qualified for exemption. In case of tour and travel services, services by a specified organization in respect of a religious pilgrimage facilitated the government of India under bilateral agreement or arrangement are exempted from GST, meaning thereby the following elements should exist to qualify for exemption. Who is a specified organization to offer the tour and travel services here means one is called Hajj Committee of India, central or state level as the case may be. The other one is Kuman Mandal Vikas Nigam Limited, a government of Uttarakhand undertaking. If these specified organizations offer the tour in respect of religious pilgrimage, it should be in respect of religious pilgrimage. What type of religious pilgrimage here means our Muslim brothers is to visit Saudi Arabia for Hajj and Umrah services. Our Hindu brothers is to visit holy place Manas Sarovar, Lord place where we used to go over there to take the blessings of the Almighty, Manas Sarovar. So, for that purpose, these specified organizations offering the tour and travel services to our Indians for their religious pilgrimage, where the government of India has a bilateral agreement with the other country to permit our Indians to have their worship, then it is qualified from exemption. That means to say that Nambiar tour and travel service provider from Kochi offer the tour to our Indian pilgrims to perform their pilgrimage at a holy place, let us say Tirumala Tirupati, Tirumala, to have the blessings of the Almighty Lord Venkateswara Swami. Such tour and travel services offered by Nambiar tour and travel services. Though may be religious pilgrimage, religious nature to pilgrims offer this particular tour, but it is not qualified from exemption because it is not offered by specified organizations. Moreover, there is no bilateral agreement between two countries in this regard. As a result, in the given case, Nambiar tour and travel services will attract the GST. Further, my dear friends, referring further, services provided by a tour operator to a foreign tourist in relation to a tour conducted wholly outside India exempted from the payment of the GST. What do you mean this? How to understand this particular tour and travel services? For example, my dear friends, for example, my name is X and Company, tour and travel service provider from Chennai, Tamil Nadu. X and Company registered under the GST in the state of Tamil Nadu. Such X and Company offer the tour to Ivanka, daughter of Trump from USA, to Singapore and Malaysia. 6 nights and 7 days package tour offered by X and Company from India to a tourist who is from USA. The tour conducted wholly Singapore and Malaysia, which is outside India. So, Indian tour operator offered the tour to a foreign nationalist in a foreign country. If so, that is fully exempted under GST. Now the doubt arises, sir, what happened if XN company from Chennai offered the tour to Ivanka, daughter of a Trump, not only in Singapore, Malaysia, but also in New Delhi, which is partly outside India, partly in India, partly in non-taxable territory as well as partly in taxable territory. In that case, prior to the circular of the CBIC, we used to say that partly taxable, partly exempted. In that case, the entire value taxable. Like that, we used to interpret their own interpretations. Each and every expert in the indirect tax laws, tax practitioners interpret in their own way. Now we have a proper way of interpretation, a proper way of approach of classification as well as clarification to tax on this matter, where a tour operator offered the tour partly outside India, partly in India to a foreign nationalist. In such case, it is partly taxable, partly exempted as guided by the CBIC in their clarification. So I am now bringing to a notice that entire clarification of the CBIC in this regard for your kind consideration, my dear friends. With effect from 18th July 2022, the tour operator services, which is performed partly in India and partly outside India, supplied by a tour operator to a foreign tourist, to the extent of the value of the tour operator services which is performed outside India, is exempt from the GST. Sir, a doubt will come. If the tour operator offer the tour to an Indian nationalist, to Indian, in that case partly in India, partly outside India, in that case, Mr., the entire value will enter the GST, because the concept of place of supply will come into picture. A tour operator, if offered the tour to our Indians, partly in India, partly outside India, no sir, wholly outside India, in spite of that, will attract the GST in India, because the exemption are given for a tour operator who offer the tour to our Indians, partly in India, partly outside India, or wholly outside India, where the place of supply concept comes into picture, resulting that entire supply will attract the GST. However, a tour operator from India, who is a registered person in India, offered the tour to foreign nationalist. Where offer the tour? Outside India wholly exempted. No sir, partly outside India, partly in India, to a foreign nationalist. In that case, this circular relevant to look into what is to tax, what is not to tax. Now reading again, tour operator services which is performed partly in India and partly outside India, supplied by a tour operator to a foreign tourist, to the extent of the value of the tour operator services which is performed outside India, is exempted from GST, meaning thereby whatever proportionate value provided in India will attract the GST. If that is the case, how to understand? Further, they mentioned here by saying that provided that value of the tour operator services performed outside India shall be such proportion of the total consideration charged for the entire tour which is equal to the proportion which the number of days for which the tour is performed outside India has to the total number of days comprising the tour, or 50% of the total consideration for the entire tour, whichever is less is the concept which is qualified from exemption. How to understand this? This understanding further I am presenting, sir. Provided further that, namely second proviso, provided further that in making the above calculations, any duration of time equal to or exceeding 12 hours shall be considered as one of full day, and any duration of time less than 12 hours shall be taken as half a day. Who is foreign tourist? Means a person not normally resided in India or who is normally resident in India, who enters into India for a stay for not more than 6 months for legitimate non-immigrant purposes, which you are aware of that, you are very master in the income tax. The similar concept we are drawn here also. Foreign tourist means a person not normally resident in India who enters India for a stay of not more than 6 months, for legitimate non-immigrant purposes. In that case, non-foreign tourist. Now, coming to the point, partly in India, partly outside India, where the consideration proportionate to the level of number of days tour conduct outside India, that value or 50% of the consideration, whichever is less is the value treated as considered outside India, therefore qualify exemption, the balance will be taxable in India. And if the tour conducted outside India, where if it is 12 hours or exceeding 12 hours, shall be considered as a full day. If it is less than 12 hours, half day. This is applicable only for number of days tour conducted outside India, not in India. They very clearly said here, for the purposes of, for the provided that in making the above calculations, means this computation talks about what? The proportion which the number of days for which the tour is performed outside India. For example, 4 days 8 hours outside India, then it is 4.5 days. Sir, 4 hours, 4 days 13 hours, 4 days 13 hours. In that case, 5 days. If that is the case, you have to be considered 12 hours and above 1 day, below 12 hours half a day, only for the number of days outside India, only this computation. It is not applicable if you provide that number of hours in India. This multiplication cannot be come into picture. So, how to understand this? Presenting one example. There are so many examples I am going to bring to notice. Example 1, example 2, example 3, like that. Once I come to all examples which is drawn from the circular of the CBIC, then you will be able to get all information full-fledged manner. There won't be any room to think a question in this regard. If you have it, I am there with you to answer it. Now presenting, my dear friends, example 1. First and foremost, Nambiyar Tour and Travel, Cochin, Kerala. Nambiyar Tour and Travel, Cochin. That means he is in India, registered person in India. Offer the tour operator services supplied. To whom supplied? To Mr. Trump, who is a citizen of USA, who is foreign tourist in India is considered. So, who is a foreign tourist? Our Nambiyar and Tour Travels from Cochin offer the tour to Mr. Trump of USA. 3 days in India, 2 days in Nepal. Entire value of consideration is 1 lakh rupees in Indian rupees. If there is a case that 1 lakh multiplied by number of days outside India 2 divided by total number of days 5, proportionate amount rupees 40,000. So outside India rupees 40,000 or 50% of the total value of consideration, namely on 1 lakh 50%, namely 50,000, whichever is less. Which is the less here? 40,000, which is qualified from exemption. The balance amount of rupees 60,000 is taxable in India, set by CBIC. The second example, bring into notice example 2. Example 2 with regard to tour and travel services. Example 2 I am bringing to a notice with regard to tour and travel services. Here, same, our supplier of service of tour and travel operator is Columbia Tour and Travel from Kochi, namely Kerala. He offered the tour to Mr. Trump, who is a USA person, foreign tourist. 3 days in India, 3 nights in Nepal. Means the entire value of consideration remains 1 lakh. 1 lakh into 3 days, namely 3 nights here, divided by total number of days. 3 plus 2, 5 days. So how much comes? 3 by 5 multiplied by 1 lakh. In that case, it is coming here almost all 60,000 or 50% of the total value of consideration, namely 50,000. Among the two, whichever is less, 50,000 is taxable, 50,000 is exempted, meaning thereby the number of days outside India divided by total number of days multiplied by the consideration. The value comes here rupees 60,000. 50% of the total value of consideration 50,000. Among the two, 60,000 or 50,000, whichever is less. 50,000 is less, it is considered as a rented outside India, which is qualified from exemption. The balance out of 1 lakh, balance left over is 50,000 is taxable in India. It is example 2. Coming to the example 3. Example 3 I am bringing to notice for a kind consideration. Same, our supplier of service tour and travel services by Nambiar, tour travel services from Cochin, India, provide this service to the recipient who is a foreign tourist, namely Mr. Trump, USA. Wherein, carefully listen here, 2.5 days in India, 3 days in Nepal, meaning thereby we should not round off number of days here. Reason, rounding off number of days 12 hours and above into 1 day is only when stay abroad or to provide abroad. In India, if you provide, actuals you have take. That means you say that 1 lakh is the consideration received full value for both the places, India and Nepal. 1 lakh multiplied by number of days outside India, Nepal, 3 days divided by 5.5 days only. Thereby, we got here the proportion value. Here comes out rupees 54,545. 54,545. This value or 50% of the total consideration. Namely, 50% of 1 lakh is equal to 50,000. Whichever is less, which is less, 50,000, which is qualified from exemption, the balance 50,000 taxable in the given case. Further, my dear friends, example 4 I am referring to for a kind consideration, observation and understanding purpose. Nambiar Tour and Travel Cochin offered the tour from India to foreign tourist, namely Mr. Trump, USA, 2 days in India, 2.5 days in Nepal. 2.5 days Nepal. 0.5 means 24 hours, 50%, namely 12 hours. 12 hours and above will convert into full day. That means number of days outside India is 3 days. Number of days in India is 2 days. Therefore, 1 lakh multiplied by 3 divided by 5, which comes out here rupees 60,000. 60,000 rupees or 50% of the total consideration, namely on 1 lakh, namely 50,000. 60,000 or 50,000, whichever is less. 50,000, which is qualified for exemption. The balance 50,000 out of 1 lakh will be taxable value of supply. As simple as this. In this manner, tour and travel services offered by an Indian tour operator to a foreign tourist, partly in India, partly outside India, will be qualified from exemption. The balance value will be taxable. Further, my dear friends, referring to here, of course, there are so many locations or tourist spot we used to come across. Houseboat. Houseboat, there are two types of houseboats. One is moving houseboat. This houseboat is moving, sightseeing, different scenarios, different locations, different sites that tourists can able to view. It's called moving houseboat. There are houseboats which are stagnant. You used to come across this type of houseboats, especially in Jammu and Kashmir, where houseboats are not moving. Some of the houseboats are stagnant. On water it will stay, that's all, it won't move. So here, if houseboat is offered for a tour and travel services, which is a moving houseboat. This is a moving houseboat where Mr. Rafi and Rafi family, we booked this particular room inside of this particular place, and tour travel operator offering the tour by allotting the room to us in houseboat, which is moving boat. He provides two services: tour and travel services, short-term accommodation services. Then the clarification given by CBSE. Here the principal supply is tour and travel services, because sightseeing is available, different locations, different places one can able to view and enjoy. In that case, is a tour and travel services, because it is a houseboat which is moving boat. On the other hand, static houseboat not covered under tour and travel services, then where going to be covered to tax? Under the short term accommodation services. Clarification of the CBSE in this regard we have. So houseboat, moving nature, tour and travel services. Static nature is short term accommodation services. Now please come back, referring to you furthermore here the points. Likewise, we too have here, there are so many tour and travel operating or tour and travel operators, which includes Indian Railways also, specifically designed the trains predominantly meant for tourism purpose, like tours conducted through luxury trains, namely Maharaja Express, Deccan Odyssey, Heritage of India, etc., are operating by Indian Railways. If they operating as a tour and travel operator, predominantly meant for, obviously taxable under the head tour and travel operator, but not transportation of passenger services. Such a tour and travel operator offering, for example, Maharaja Express. Maharaja Express, for example, is ordinary coach. For example, ordinary coach, no AC, no first class. In that case, are they qualify exemption? Absolutely not qualify for exemption, because transportation of passenger services in an ordinary coach other than AC or first class qualify exemption. When you talk about tour and travel operator, for them that particular coach AC or first class immaterial or ordinary. What type of service you providing? Tour and travel services, which is taxable nature, obviously will attract the GST.